while I was waiting for you to get here, Odran,
yes, I did get lost.
So this is I was mentioning that the basis for today's programme is a letter you wrote to the Irish Times.
Yeah.
Is there now? I paraphrased it by saying, and feel free to correct me or even to clarify on this one. I paraphrased it by saying that you were predicting that if we do not get to grips and deal with the issue of homelessness, then we are staring straight into the face of another property bubble collapse or bursting of a property bubble. How does that fit in?
It's not too far away, and I'm more looking at it as well. Like homelessness is a massive problem, but so too is housing. I look at the model we've worked at, and it's got us into trouble over decades. We've constantly pushed out loads of houses and responded by huge quantity building and then stopping. And the difficulty here is that we can't do that anymore. We have a homeless crisis, and I think that's going to cause us more of a social meltdown than it does even with an economic meltdown.
Can I just, without being too pedantic on this one, Odran, I'll tell you why. I think it's getting on to nearly 5 years ago. I raised the issue of homelessness with Oisin Quinn, who was then the Lord Mayor. That'll show you how far back it is. And I've since raised it with every other Lord Mayor, and the homelessness is top of their priorities. Now, back then, 5 years ago, we were essentially defining homelessness as the people sleeping in doorways, the people, rough sleepers is the generic term.
That's what people think of.
Has that evolved in that sense of the word? Because while I appreciate measures have been taken to reduce that, and although the numbers have gone up, we seem to still be talking about homelessness as a major crisis, even though that issue has had a lot of, shall we say, a lot of resources poured into it and a lot of consideration given to it. So how would you define homelessness, Odran?
Okay, well, it goes much further. We've an awful lot of people living in hotel accommodation because they've lost their family home. We've a lot of people being put up in different places by the city council, by the health authorities, a whole range of different people. A lot of payments made. To keep people in temporary accommodation. And I think that factors into the homeless figures. And again, there's those who are rough sleepers or who are in hostels or whatever. But I think it's a lack of actually having a permanent accommodation. Now, when you look at that, we have a lot of people, that's quite a substantial sum of people. But throw that on top of that, we have an awful lot of people in really short-term rental accommodation who are working but have no security of tenure, and that's problematic as well.
Let me go back a bit, Odran, now. In Ireland, I tend to look at the issue from a perspective of security and shelter.
Yes.
Now, am I right in thinking that the Irish Constitution does not confer on the state any obligation to house or shelter people, or am I incorrect about that?
No, there is nothing there in the Constitution to probably that. There are implied things of looking after people, but it doesn't say anything about housing, and probably shouldn't say anything on housing.
But shelter is the issue I took up with Oisin Quinn.
Yes,
is that do people have a right to shelter? And although we're not supposed to have personal opinions, my view is that people have a right to shelter. In other words, a roof over your head and some form of security.
There's a couple of things in economics. There's a couple of basic things. Food and shelter are critical. Food, water, shelter that you actually require. And what I put in the article was one of the things. Like I did talk about a property meltdown potential, but there is a societal meltdown. We actually have to think about who we are and the kind of concept of a social solidarity. We've moved an awful long way from that in the past. We've had crisis before where we've all come together. At one stage we were building 30,000 social housing units a year. We don't hardly build anything now, and we don't seem to get that as a society.
But I would put it to you, to paraphrase Hamlet, was that ever anything more than a custom more honoured in the breach than the observance?
I do think there was a more caring part of us before. I think something really nasty happened to us with kind of the mass economic growth we had, and there was nothing wrong with actually becoming wealthier and doing better for ourselves, but we became very insulated as individuals. We've actually, just throw one other thing, when we've had flooding down the country, the government put money in, but there was no kind of mad issue of running to rescue people down the country who were being flooded out. We did that element of, oh my goodness, this is a national issue. It just didn't feel there.
You're probably a little bit younger than me, Odran, but I mean, I remember I grew up in Ballybock. We used to you get the bus down Ballybock Road and up to Parliament, and when you got to just about the North Circular Road, that was slums. That was tenements now.
Yes.
With all the social problems that went with that as well. So that's why my memory is of a time when it was really bad. Generally speaking, the people who lived down the road in Fairview certainly didn't care too much about the ones in Ballybock, and I can guarantee you the ones who lived in Clontarf, well, they wouldn't even go that way. They would take the nice scenic route into town. So that's why I just wonder, is this a concept that we aspire to, but really we don't really pay that much more than lip service to it?
I think there's an element there of individual choice that comes on, but I do think that in terms of kind of an official Ireland, kind of from a government perspective, there would have been a response in the past. There is a response of sorts now, but it is a response of sorts. This response we're coming with now, I don't know how long it's been going on, but it's a market-led response. It's not a human need-led, and that becomes really problematic.
I just want to put something to you. This was an observation. I had lived in Ireland between, say, the early 70s to about the mid 90s. Now that was slightly before the boom kicked in. But what I noticed when I came back here, about 96 or thereabouts.
All right, starting to get ugly then.
Well, something I'd never seen before, and that was gated estates.
Yes,
I'd never seen that before, and they were all in middle class areas, usually in Castleknock and places like that. But I'm not going to knock them exclusively. And what that struck me is that we are developing a class of people that don't want to mix with their only want to mix with their immediate neighbours.
Absolutely.
And their immediate neighbours are going to be the same demographics, roughly speaking.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say. It is fair to say. And again, even if you look at the kind of the census data that's come in, particularly the last two census, and you see where you do the deprivation index, there are some really, really wealthy areas and there are some really, really poor areas, and the mix becomes more diverse away. And I know in schools people are actually choosing schools so as to actually keep them away from certain people.
On that point then, Odran, all of these gated communities is the way I would put it, which I think is a bit of an oxymoron myself.
Sure, no, yeah.
But all of those would have been approved by either local councils, and I'm talking just the 4 Dublin councils here, or the magic words on board planola. So clearly local government has a responsibility for this disconnect that has happened. Would you accept that?
I would accept that, yes. I actually think there are certain things I enjoy about being a planner, and there's certain things that would be embarrassing about a planner. I actually think we've the profession has moved more towards tick boxing, and again, one of the great things I think in DIT we try to move people away from that. But I think the concept of allowing people to live in gated communities, it's something that's happened. It's not just here; it's come from elsewhere as well. And well, if people do want to live and be tucked away from the great unwashed, and they should pay for it. And in one way we've introduced property taxes now, which I'm massive in favour of that, but I think they should pay through the nose for their elitism. Okay,
can I come back to you? Just a couple of things. I talked about a constitutional requirement to provide shelter. What is the local government requirement, particularly as what we both tend to know more about as Dublin City Council? And where does a board planola fit into all of this? Because every time I tune into Dublin City Council and it's can't do that, board planola. Can you just very briefly, Odran, because I appreciate it's a complex subject, what is the obligation of a local government, and are they all the same?
Let's start on that one, all right. Now, local government was a very big housing authority.
Massive, wasn't it?
Massive.
Yes,
but it has moved out of it. It doesn't build housing anymore. Now it's now getting involved again, but all the personnel who were involved in housing before are gone. Yeah. Okay, all the capacity to do the architectural work, the planning work, all of that sort of stuff has been diminished over a long period of time. We moved to a planning system that done what they call a Part 5, where the private sector would build certain things. They didn't want to do any of this stuff. Yeah. They weren't inclined to do it. So there isn't any money in it. There is, yeah. And as you see now, even there's more money in doing commercial development, so they're not building houses. So the fact that the city councils and the county councils have all moved away from this has meant that our public stock of housing is very low, and they're not adding to it, and now they're out trying to retrofit old stuff and maybe do a few starts. I heard, what was it, something like we're going to have 4,000 social houses built next year. We're in massive crisis. 4,000 scratching the surface of this problem, but there is no agency, and maybe they shouldn't have it anymore. Okay,
can I just and I'll take in what we would call the right wing argument on this. People of my generation, they will see social housing, and in other words, social housing that was largely driven by the local authorities. Absolutely, they would look and see 3 or 4 areas. And the first one I recall was Ballyfermot. That was the big one. Then we followed that up with Ballymun.
And Finglas.
Finglas as well, Finglas. Then we had Darndale and Tulla. Every one of them has had massive social problems.
Absolutely.
And is that a consequence or is that neglect?
No, it's a bit of both. Okay, right. Just take the Ballymun for instance. The development of the apartments in Ballymun, okay, the flats. They were supposed to have concierge services at the door, kind of prevent people coming in and being part of what you would do in a normal flat complex. They were supposed to have shopping, but there was fantastic pieces, transport as well. But this was a mass movement of people out of the city centre from their normal habitat. Where they had traditional employment, which was about to die, and it all died. So now you've left a single income group in one area, and that's a problem. Now, while the housing stock that was built by the public authorities were brilliant, but you actually moved an awful lot of people who are in a certain circumstances and not wealthy all into the one area, and then you're wondering why it won't work. So we have a real problem in the design. Now, I just take it a stage further on this one, and because what you said here in some ways is a lot of people don't like social housing, and there's probably a rationale in people's heads for that. I know one estate where I did live, the city council were trying to buy property and they done a survey. 98% of the people didn't want anybody from the local authorities in there. And most of the people who had bought the houses came from local authorities. So there is a thing of actually, that's behind me, I want to go on. And property ownership is good. It's a bit like Animal Farm, 2 legs good, 4 legs
Well,
bad.
It's an interesting one because the people who I've spoken at length to people from the Netherlands about this, and one of my good friends from the Netherlands, he used to describe it as the Irish property owning fetish.
It is, yes.
In other words, as you say, there was a stigma in living in either rented accommodation.
Absolutely. That was nearly worse.
In fact, in my day, living in apartments was very stigmatic. And then living in rented accommodation, particularly if it was what we would call corporation.
Absolutely.
But there's a very interesting one, and the one I know most about at the time was the apartment complex, what we would call the Ballybock Flats. Now, the Ballybock Flats were built on an Art Deco design from the 30s in Amsterdam. So the same complexes never had these social problems in the Netherlands that they do here. So I have to wonder then, do we have a cultural issue here? Because it isn't necessarily a structural issue.
No, I don't think it's a structural issue, but I do think is the thing, if you actually put a lot of people who are poor into the one area and they have no kind of facilities and they don't have anything else, then you're going to have problems. There are problems in every culture. There's problems in the Netherlands as well.
The French seem to have it particularly because they base it on race, really, don't they?
They do. And again, the fringes of Paris are as bad as you'll come anywhere else. But, you know, that thing cultural, like we used to eat fish either.
That's true.
Fish was a famine food, and that was for poor things, you know. So we had these psychological issues, except on Fridays, which was a punishment.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, no, we always assumed it was because the Pope had a big fishing fleet.
Possibly did, yes.
So,
we'll take it on that one, right? That thing that we had about flats and apartments and all of that sort of stuff is really problematic in going forward. People still say, you know, I wouldn't live in a flat, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do the other. There is good a living as you come across, because all the major cities do this, and you know that's how they have a public transport system.
Well, I was about to say the alternative is: do you want to spend 2 hours on a train every morning, and then 2 hours in the evening as well? So
no.
Can I? Sorry, just to get it a bit clearer, Odran, because every week I tune into Dublin City Council on the webcast. Great service, terrific. Every week, every month, and I can assume that we're going to have loads of councillors mouthing off about homelessness, terrible problem, and invariably it's just a bit of blame game. They did this and you didn't do that and whatever. What is the role or what is the responsibility of local government in terms of provision of housing or provision of shelter? Again,
that's a massive question, because I don't know they know that question. I think they look after their own stock. They know they have to make provision for social housing. They're in charge of the planning system in the Part 5. They don't have the money. I think
they can't raise their own revenue.
You know, and the department, I think, are lying to them. I think the councillors don't have any power whatsoever, except in terms of the development plan and the budget, and maybe sack the county manager. But after that, what is their problem? And I really think it's going to the nub of the problem. How do we govern ourselves? Yeah. And it's a massive problem.
That's what strikes me is that do we come back to this nexus between central and local government, and particularly the way the Local Government Act is drawn up? Does this work to Dublin's advantage or disadvantage? Because we seem to be the ones that are the main, how can I put it, we get the main consequence of this fallout. We can't raise our own revenue or anything of that nature.
I actually think this is, for a capital city that's developing, that's 40% of the population of the country, not to have a governance structure that's unified, that actually probably has a directly elected mayor and that actually has power, stops us doing any real development work in the city. We're waiting for government to give money to allow you to do things that you should be able to do yourself. And that I think is a massive problem.
Something that you wrote at the end, and I'll just see if I can quote you here, because I wanted to get you to clarify this. It says, if we are to solve the housing crisis, the cost of accommodation must be forced down. When people realise this, there will be no incentive to purchase housing until new and affordable accommodation becomes available. What is stopping this from happening is is a massive need for accommodation. Essentially, one of the things you're alluding to, and it said, it is likely Ireland will once again experience a very painful landing if we don't deal with this. I'm not seeing immediately how the two issues are related. Because it strikes me as being very different to 2007.
It is different. But it's there, because it's different, it doesn't mean you're not heading in the same direction. Now, there'll be other people who will disagree with me, but remember in 2007, as we were getting towards peak price in housing, it was starting to slow down a bit in terms of price increases, and then it hit the peak price. After peak price, it wasn't an incremental fall, it was a complete collapse.
But that was accompanied with a banking failure.
Part of the banking failure came between overexposure to housing. The two of them are interlinked. Now, the fact that
are they now, though? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, now they're not lending money, which is creating a shortage in terms of people being able to buy houses, and property developers aren't building houses because they don't know that people have the cash to buy. So what's happening here is that prices are going up. And do you notice something in the newspaper? They're talking about we're now 20 or 30% below peak level in 2007.
I said we're about 85% now.
Yeah, that 2007 was mad.
Oh yeah, I agree. However, and just again an observation, Odran, I live in Clontarf, and like everywhere else, there was nothing happening there. We had derelict sites, we had a whole range of things, but we have now two major developments on site. we have a planned third one up in St Anne's Park,
Sure,
which they're looking for 200 odd houses. What I'm seeing is the same thing we always get, is that the cream being taken off. In other
Absolutely.
words, none of these places that are in my neighbourhood are going to go for less than 700,000.
No.
So this is people who have money. In other words, the point you are making is that the people who are going to buy them are not going to be really that pushed about who's having a homeless problem down in Summerhill, 2 miles down the road.
No, they're not, and quite a number of the very, very large houses are being are bought for cash, because cash is coming out to play, and people who have significant money. But if you're on 70 grand a year, and you look at what mortgage you require and how much of that of your income is taken on that one to buy a property, and what property you could buy. It's a very, very different than the property you're talking about. And if property is pushed up at the top rate, it will be pushed up absolutely everywhere else. And that, I think, becomes a bit of a problem. And that's what frightens me.
Odran, unfortunately we've run out of time.
Sure,
I'm going to have to get you back to talk about local property tax. I'm not a fan of it, but that's a separate
I know,
matter.
that's fine,
And a whole range of other issues which we've only scraped the surface of here. So, Odran Reid, always a pleasure to speak with you, and always
Likewise.
a pleasure to have you as a guest.